Bella froze at the sudden crash of the door behind her. The candle flame trembled, sending long shadows crawling across the stone walls of the tower chamber. Slowly, she turned around. Her stepmother was no longer standing by the doorway. Instead, Catherine had moved closer, far closer than Bella expected. And the look in her eyes had changed. Gone was the polite smile she wore in front of guests. What remained was something colder, something calculating. "Catherine," Bella said quietly. For a moment, the only sound in the room was the wind howling outside the narrow tower window. Then Catherine spoke. "You were always too clever for your own good." Bella's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" Catherine folded her hands calmly, studying her like a chess player examining the final move of a match. "You noticed the whispers. The glances. I wondered how long it would take." Bella's voice hardened. "If this is some sort of test, I don't appreciate." "Oh, it's not a test," Catherine interrupted softly. "It's an ending." A chill ran through Bella's entire body. "The truth you've been searching for about your mother," Catherine continued, "is far more complicated than the story your father told you." Bella's fingers tightened on the edge of the chest. "My mother died of illness." "That," Catherine said with a faint smile, "is what the world was meant to believe." Bella stared at her. "You're lying." But Catherine only tilted her head. "Your mother knew something that could have destroyed this family. A secret buried in those documents behind you." Bella slowly glanced at the chest. "And what does that have to do with my engagement?" "Everything." Catherine stepped closer. "If you marry Lord Worthington tonight, the Ashcroft name regains power, influence, and protection. But if those papers ever surface, everything collapses." Bella's mind raced. "So you brought me here to warn me?" Catherine laughed softly. "No, my dear." Another gust of wind rattled the tower window. "I brought you here to make sure the problem disappears." Bella felt the blood drain from her face. "You can't be serious." "Oh, I'm completely serious." For the first time, Bella noticed how close they were standing to the open window. The night sky stretched beyond it like an endless void. "You see," Catherine said calmly, "a tragic accident on the night of a grand celebration, people will talk about it for weeks." Bella slowly backed away. "You're insane." "Perhaps," Catherine replied. "But I'm also practical." Bella's voice dropped to a whisper. "My father will never forgive you." Catherine's smile widened slightly. "Your father knows exactly what must be done." Those words struck Bella harder than any physical blow. "No, I'm afraid so." For a brief moment, Bella saw her entire life collapse, the family she trusted, the home she loved, the future she had been promised. All built on lies. Catherine's voice grew colder. "You should feel honored, truly. Your beauty saved this family once by securing a wealthy marriage." She stepped even closer. "And now it will save us again." Bella's instinct screamed. "Run." But the tower room offered nowhere to go. Catherine suddenly lunged forward. Bella stumbled backward in shock. Her heel struck the stone ledge beneath the window. For one horrifying second, she teetered between balance and empty air. Then Catherine pushed. Bella's scream tore into the night as the ground vanished beneath her feet. The world spun into darkness. Wind roared in her ears as the tower rushed away above her. In that terrifying plunge, Bella realized something strange. She wasn't thinking about death. She was thinking about betrayal. Who else knew? How many smiles at the celebration below had been part of this cruel plan? The ground was racing toward her. Closer. Closer. Then, arms. Strong, unyielding arms wrapped around her waist mid-fall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs as someone rolled across the grass with her, shielding her body from the brutal landing. For a moment, everything was silent. Bella opened her eyes slowly. Above her was the face of a man she had never seen before. Dark hair. Sharp features. And eyes the color of storm clouds. He looked down at her with stunned disbelief. "Well," he said quietly, catching his breath, "I must say, that is the most dramatic entrance I have ever witnessed." Bella blinked, still shaking. "Who are you?" The stranger helped her sit up, glancing briefly toward the tower above. "My name," he said calmly, "is Edward Kensington." He paused. "And judging by the fact that someone just threw you out of a window." His grey eyes hardened slightly. "I suspect this evening is about to become very complicated." The warmth of the fire should have comforted her, yet Bella still felt the cold lingering deep in her bones. The events of the night replayed again and again in her mind, the tower, Catherine's confession, the terrifying fall through empty air. Every moment felt unreal, like fragments of a nightmare she had not yet woken from. Across the room, Edward stood near the tall window of his library, his posture rigid as he stared out into the quiet London street. The soft glow of the firelight reflected against the glass, outlining the sharp angles of his face. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. Bella finally broke the silence. My stepmother will realize soon enough that I survived. Edward turned from the window slowly. Yes, he said calmly. And when she does, she will likely act quickly. Bella tightened the cloak around her shoulders. She confessed everything, she said quietly. Her plan, her son, the inheritance. Edward's expression darkened slightly. That confirms what I suspected. Bella looked up at him. You suspected something like this. He walked toward the desk, resting one hand against its polished surface. I did not know the exact details, he admitted, but I had reason to believe Lord Worthington's sudden interest in your family was not entirely innocent. Bella frowned. My engagement was arranged months ago. Arranged, Edward repeated thoughtfully. Yes. But arrangements often serve more than one purpose. She studied him carefully. You said earlier that you came to the manor to investigate him. Edward nodded once. Worthington has recently become involved in several financial dealings that raised concerns among certain officials. Land transfers, questionable investments, and connections to people who prefer to remain hidden. Bella's confusion deepened. What does that have to do with me? Everything, Edward replied. He walked closer, lowering his voice slightly. If you had married him tonight, your family estate would eventually have fallen under his influence. Bella felt a slow, uneasy realization forming. You believe he knew about Catherine's plan? I cannot prove it yet, Edward said. But the timing is suspicious. Bella leaned back in the chair, exhausted. My entire life feels like a carefully constructed lie. Edward studied her for a moment before speaking again. Tonight changed more than you realize. Bella met his gaze. In what way? You cannot return to the manor. She knew he was right. If Catherine believes you are dead, that gives us a temporary advantage, he continued. But the moment she learns otherwise, she will attempt to finish what she started. Bella looked down at the flames dancing in the fireplace. So I am expected to simply disappear? For now, Edward said. Silence returned to the room. After a moment, Bella spoke again. My father, does he truly know about this? I do not know. She swallowed. I want to believe he wouldn't allow something like this. Then we will find out the truth, Edward said firmly. Bella studied him. You speak as though this is now your responsibility. Edward gave a faint, almost amused smile. I witnessed an attempted murder tonight. Walking away would make me complicit. And helping me could place you in danger. He shrugged lightly. I have faced worse risks. Bella could not help noticing the quiet confidence in his voice. For the first time since the tower, she felt a small flicker of hope. What happens next? She asked. Edward moved toward a cabinet and poured 2 glasses of water, handing one to her. First, you rest, he said. She accepted the glass, though her hands still trembled slightly. And tomorrow? Edward leaned against the edge of the desk, his grey eyes thoughtful. Tomorrow we begin asking questions. About my stepmother. About everyone. Bella looked up sharply. Everyone? Edward nodded slowly. If Catherine was bold enough to attempt something like this, it is unlikely she acted completely alone. The implication sent a chill down Bella's spine. You believe there are others involved? I believe, Edward said carefully, that secrets of this magnitude rarely belong to only one person. Bella stared into the fire again. Her life only hours earlier had been simple, predictable, even if not entirely happy. Now it had become something else entirely. Dangerous. Uncertain. And strangely, alive. Edward watched her quietly before speaking again. For tonight, you are safe here. Bella gave a tired nod. But as she settled deeper into the chair, one troubling thought refused to leave her mind. If Catherine had spent years planning this moment, then the game that had begun tonight was far from over. Bella lowered the glass slowly, letting his words settle in the heavy silence of the room. So my home is no longer safe, she said quietly. Edward did not hesitate. No. The honesty in his voice left no room for comfort. If you return, he continued, your stepmother will know you survived. Once that happens, she will not risk a second failure. Bella stared into the fire again, watching the flames twist and bend. And Lord Worthington? Edward's mouth tightened slightly. If he learns that you are alive and no longer under his influence, he may become equally desperate. A faint, bitter smile touched Bella's lips. How extraordinary, she murmured. 2 people plotting my death for entirely different reasons. Edward leaned forward slightly. You are not powerless in this situation. Bella looked up. It hardly feels that way. You possess something both of them want, he said calmly. That gives you leverage. My inheritance. Yes. Bella folded her hands together, forcing herself to think clearly despite the exhaustion pressing against her mind. If I disappear, she said slowly, they will assume I am dead. For a time, Edward agreed. But eventually the truth will surface. It usually does. Bella exhaled softly. So hiding only delays the problem. Correct. Then what would you suggest? Edward was quiet for a moment before answering. We expose them. Bella blinked in surprise. Expose them? How? Carefully. He stood and walked toward the bookshelf, retrieving a small leather notebook from the desk nearby. Catherine revealed more than she intended tonight. Her motive, her plan, even the existence of this mysterious son. Bella frowned. Richard. Edward nodded. Yes. A man who conveniently appears in the inheritance line should you die. Bella shifted in her chair. If he truly exists. Oh, he exists, Edward said calmly. I had already begun looking into certain financial connections tied to your family estate. The name surfaced more than once. Bella's heart sank. So this has been planned for years. Most likely. She rubbed her temples lightly. My entire life was simply an obstacle in someone else's scheme. Edward watched her carefully. You are still alive. That alone has changed the entire game. Bella looked up at him again. And what role do you intend to play in this game? Edward's expression remained calm, but his eyes held a quiet intensity. I intend to finish what I started tonight. And what is that? Protecting you, he said simply. Bella held his gaze. You barely know me. That may be true, he replied. But I know enough. A faint silence passed between them. The fire crackled softly. Bella finally asked the question that had been lingering in her mind. What happens when my stepmother discovers there is no body beneath that tower? Edward gave a faint, knowing smile. She already has. Bella straightened. You sound very certain. I am. And why is that? Edward walked back toward the window, glancing into the dark street beyond. Because if Catherine realizes you survived. He paused. Her next move will not be patience. Bella felt unease tighten in her chest. You think she will act again tonight? Edward looked back at her. I think she will attempt to finish the problem before sunrise. Bella's voice dropped. And if she does? Edward's expression hardened with quiet resolve. Then she will discover that tonight, Lady Ashcroft. He paused slightly. You are no longer alone. Edward stopped speaking the moment Bella revealed her idea. The fire in the library crackled softly, but the tension between them grew heavy. You want to walk directly into the very world that tried to destroy you, he said slowly. Bella didn't look away. I want to understand it. Edward shook his head. That organization arranged multiple deaths. You barely survived one. And hiding here forever won't stop them, she replied calmly. Edward paced a few steps across the room, clearly struggling with the thought. You nearly died 3 nights ago. Yes, Bella said quietly. And that is exactly why I cannot pretend this has nothing to do with me. Edward stopped walking. You believe you can infiltrate them? I believe they don't know what I look like when I'm not Lady Bella Ashcroft. Edward studied her face carefully. You underestimate the risk. And you underestimate my determination. For a moment neither spoke. Finally Edward sighed. You've already decided. Bella gave a small, honest smile. I have. He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. Explain your plan. Bella stood and walked toward the window, gathering her thoughts. Everyone believes Lady Bella Ashcroft is dead, she began. That gives us an advantage. Edward nodded slightly. Continue. If I appear somewhere new, under a different name, no one will question it. Society is full of newcomers, widows, distant relatives, companions. And you intend to become one of them. Yes. Edward watched her carefully. You would place yourself close enough to observe Worthington or anyone connected to him. Bella turned back toward him. If this network truly targets wealthy families, they must constantly be searching for new victims. Edward's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. And you intend to become the bait. Bella didn't deny it. Someone wealthy. Someone seemingly alone. Someone vulnerable. Edward immediately shook his head. Absolutely not. Bella crossed her arms. You agreed I would help. I agreed you would be involved, he corrected. Not that you would throw yourself into danger again. But that is the only way to expose them. Edward's voice hardened slightly. Bella. The way he said her name made her pause. You are not expendable, he continued. Not to them, and certainly not to me. The room grew quiet again. Bella softened her tone. I am not asking to face them alone. Edward looked at her carefully. You expect me to allow this? I expect you to trust me. He let out a quiet breath. You ask for a great deal of trust. You asked the same from me when I agreed to fake my own death. Edward could not argue with that. He walked slowly toward the fireplace. You would need a completely new identity, he said at last. Documents. History. Connections. Bella smiled faintly. You are a duke with considerable resources. I assumed such things would not be impossible. Edward glanced back at her with reluctant amusement. You have become rather bold in a very short time. I nearly died, she said simply. It changes one's perspective. Edward considered her words carefully. If we do this, he said slowly, we control every detail. Bella nodded. Agreed. You never meet anyone alone. Agreed. And the moment things become dangerous, you leave immediately. Bella hesitated for a fraction of a second. Edward noticed. That condition is not negotiable. She finally nodded. Very well. Edward studied her again, then gave a slow sigh of surrender. Then we will need to create someone entirely new. Bella raised an eyebrow. Who do you suggest I become? Edward walked to the desk and pulled out a blank sheet of paper. We begin with a name. He thought for a moment. Perhaps, Lady Isabella Hartwell. A recently arrived widow with modest wealth and few connections. Bella considered it. A widow? A believable one, Edward replied. It grants independence without inviting too many questions. Bella gave a thoughtful nod. And where does this Lady Hartwell come from? Edward's lips curved slightly. From wherever we decide. Bella watched him, realizing how naturally he moved through strategy and planning. 3 days ago she had been preparing for an engagement celebration. Now she was planning to infiltrate a criminal conspiracy with a duke who had caught her while she fell from a tower. Life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. Edward finished writing a few notes before looking up again. If this works, he said quietly, we could expose people responsible for many deaths. Bella stepped closer to the desk. And if it fails? Edward met her eyes. Then we make certain it doesn't. It made her stomach tighten, but she forced herself to maintain the fragile poise of Eleanor Hartwell. My sympathies, Worthington said smoothly, his smile polite yet predatory. It must be difficult, arriving alone in such a vast city. Bella inclined her head demurely, her altered voice soft and uncertain. It is unfamiliar, my lord, but I hope to learn quickly. Edward, observing discreetly from across the room, allowed himself a small nod of approval. Bella's transformation was convincing. Every gesture, every hesitation, every glance had been carefully calculated to suggest vulnerability without appearing foolish. Worthington's gaze lingered longer than necessary, scanning her as one might appraise a valuable painting. A young lady of means and such delicate upbringing, he murmured, more to himself than to her. I can see why your arrival has stirred interest. Bella met his eyes for just a fraction of a second, then lowered her gaze. Her heart hammered, not from fear, but from the sharp thrill of the game. This was the first test, and she had to make it perfect. One misstep could expose her. Lady Peaton, oblivious to the tension, continued her introductions, guiding Bella toward groups of eager aristocrats and fortune hunters alike. Each smile, each compliment she received, was another thread in the intricate web she was weaving. She allowed the illusion of timidity to mask her sharp observation. She noted alliances, whispered conversations, and the subtle signals of ambition in everyone around her. Worthington, still fixated on her, finally spoke again. Miss Hartwell, I should hope we might become better acquainted. Perhaps a private introduction would benefit us both? Bella's lips curved faintly, careful to appear hesitant. I would be honored, my lord, she said, keeping just enough timidity to draw him in while holding the upper hand in her mind. As she followed him toward a quieter corner, Edward moved silently along the perimeter, watching every interaction. He knew Worthington would test her immediately, probing for weaknesses, seeking the slightest hint of familiarity. Bella kept her expression careful, innocent, inexperienced, and yet subtly aware. Every word, every gesture, was a trap set in reverse. She was the bait, but the predator did not yet realize he was being observed. In that instant, as she entered Worthington's conversational orbit, a single thought struck her with clarity: survival was no longer enough. She would not merely live. She would expose them all, and she would do it on her own terms. And beneath that determination, buried deep, was a growing awareness that Edward's presence was not only a shield, it was a tether to something far more complicated than protection. Something that had begun in danger and deception, but was becoming undeniably real. The dance had begun, and Lady Eleanor Hartwell was ready. Bella met his gaze steadily, her voice calm but firm. I understand the danger, Edward, but this could be our chance to identify the entire network. If I gather proof from within, we can dismantle them completely. Edward ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly. You're asking to walk directly into the lion's den. One misstep, and... I won't misstep, Bella interrupted. I've been careful. I've studied their habits, their signals, the way they operate. I know how they think, and I know how to make them believe Eleanor Hartwell is naive and vulnerable. That's exactly the position we need to exploit. Edward paced the room, his expression tense. Even if you survive, there's no guarantee you'll leave that dinner unscathed. If the wrong person notices anything unusual, I'll be watched, Bella reminded him. Signals, escape plans, contingencies, you said yourself we control every detail. I will not act recklessly. Edward paused, his eyes searching hers for a moment longer. Finally, he nodded, albeit reluctantly. Very well. But one rule, under no circumstances are you to reveal your identity, and under no circumstances do you engage physically. Observe, report, and nothing else. Do you understand? I understand, she said, determination hardening her voice. He moved closer, lowering it slightly. I will have agents nearby, inside and outside. If anything goes wrong, extraction will be immediate. You give me the signal, and I will remove you, no questions, no delays. Bella inhaled deeply, letting the weight of the plan settle in. Then I am ready. But Edward, she added, we need a way to record everything. Evidence must be undeniable. Edward's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. Hidden notes, discreet sketches, witnesses you can subtly reference. Nothing can be left to chance. One mistake, one slip, and the entire operation is compromised. Bella nodded, her mind already racing with logistics, timings, and contingencies. I can manage that. If I am careful, I can gather everything we need, and expose not just Worthington, but Lady Peaton and anyone involved in this network. Edward's expression softened slightly, though tension remained. You truly are remarkable, Bella. I don't know that I've ever met anyone so daring. She allowed herself a faint smile, though her violet eyes remained sharp with focus. I nearly died because of them. I'm not letting them harm anyone else, not while I have the chance to stop them. Edward glanced at the elaborate map of social connections they had pinned to the wall. Then the dinner will be your next test. It's high risk, but it may also be the key to unraveling the entire organization. We must time everything perfectly. Bella studied the map, committing every detail to memory. I understand. I will go, I will observe, and I will return safely with proof. Nothing else matters right now. Edward placed a hand lightly on her shoulder. Then prepare yourself, Lady Hartwell. Tonight, you step into a world where every glance, every word, every gesture could change everything. And I will be right here, ensuring you survive it. Bella met his steel-grey eyes and nodded. The path ahead was perilous, but for the first time since her fall from the tower, she felt truly alive and determined to see justice done. Worthington's smile widened, predatory and confident. Ah, my dear Miss Hartwell, the next phase is simple in theory, he said smoothly, leaning slightly toward her. We ensure that our investment yields maximum returns. You understand, of course, that this requires careful cultivation of the assets we acquire. Bella's stomach twisted, but she kept her voice soft and curious. Assets? I'm afraid I'm not familiar with that term in this context. Why, my dear, the young ladies and gentlemen of fortune we guide are, in a sense, the future of our enterprise, Mr. Blackthorne explained, his tone precise and measured. We assist them in making advantageous alliances, ensuring that all parties involved reap the rewards intended. Bella nodded slightly, her mind working furiously. Every word, every nuance confirmed what Edward had suspected. This was not simply a social circle of fortune hunters, it was a coordinated network exploiting wealth through manipulation, deceit, and, clearly, murder if necessary. Worthington, oblivious to the device hidden beneath her gown, continued. Miss Hartwell, you are uniquely positioned to demonstrate how easily a newcomer with means can be guided, strategically. He paused, the implication hanging thick in the air, and Bella suppressed a shiver. Lady Peaton, seated at the head of the table, tapped her fingers lightly on the polished wood. We must ensure all arrangements are seamless. Any hesitation, any doubt from our contacts, could compromise the entire venture. Timing is everything. Bella's hand pressed lightly to the small device at her waist, feeling the slight vibration that confirmed Edward was listening. Every word, every plan was being recorded. Evidence they could use to dismantle the network entirely. And the girl, Worthington added casually, must remain compliant. She must believe every word we speak is for her own benefit, all while we secure the outcome we desire. Bella's eyes flicked toward him, her expression carefully innocent. I see, she said softly. It must take great skill to manage so many people. Indeed, Lady Peaton agreed, her voice smooth and calculating. And that is why we must be meticulous. Each step, each introduction, must align perfectly with our intentions. Any deviation could unravel everything. Bella sipped her wine slowly, masking her disgust with an air of polite fascination. Inside, her mind was alive with calculations, timing, exits, possible witnesses, and contingencies. Every word spoken was a piece of a puzzle that Edward and she would use to bring the entire operation crashing down. Finally, as the conversation shifted to less incriminating matters, Bella allowed herself a quiet thought: the trap was working. Every plan they laid out tonight, every cruel scheme, was being captured without their knowledge. And when the time came, justice, long overdue, would strike. But for now, she remained Eleanina Hartwell, charming, naive, and entirely irresistible to the predators around her. Every smile, every tilt of her head, every careful question drew them in further, into a web of their own making, from which there would be no escape. Her composure, her voice steady though her heart pounded. I assure you, I am Eleanina Hartwell. My father did indeed deal in textiles, and I am his only child. Lady Peaton's smile sharpened, turning almost predatory. Oh, I do admire your courage, my dear. But facts are stubborn things. Our sources suggest otherwise. Care to explain? Worthington leaned forward, eyes glinting with satisfaction. It seems our charming newcomer has been less than truthful. How intriguing. Baylor's mind raced. She had anticipated close scrutiny, but they had clearly dug deep, verifying her backstory and uncovering discrepancies. One wrong move, and her cover, and her life, would be forfeit. She took a slow breath, forcing calm into her voice. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding. My father was a private man, some records may have been lost or misreported. I can provide letters, documents, anything you require to prove my identity. Mr. Blackthorne's eyes narrowed. Letters? Documents? My dear, if this were truly a mistake, surely you would have presented them sooner. Do you expect us to believe such convenient excuses? Lady Peaton's hands rested lightly on the table, her voice cold and controlled. It seems we have a choice. Admit the deception, or allow us to discover the truth ourselves. Baylor's pulse quickened, but she held her posture, letting the practiced calm of Eleanina Hartwell carry her through. I assure you, I mean no deception. My intentions here have always been honorable. Worthington smirked. Then perhaps you will entertain a demonstration of your honesty. A simple test, nothing more, nothing that could harm anyone, I assure you. Baylor's mind flicked to Edward's warnings and the device hidden beneath her gown. She needed time, a diversion, any opportunity to buy a moment. Of course, she said softly, leaning slightly forward. I am ready to prove myself. Lady Peaton's eyes gleamed, as if she had been expecting exactly this. Very well. Then let us proceed. Mr. Blackthorne, fetch the documents. As one of the guests moved toward a hidden cabinet, Baylor felt the tension tighten around her like a noose. Every second counted. Every gesture, every word could betray her. And yet, deep within, she felt the surge of determination that had carried her through every danger so far. This was not just survival. This was her chance to turn the predator's own methods against them, to trap them in their web and bring justice to those who had nearly destroyed her. Her eyes flicked subtly to the hidden device. Edward was listening. He would hear everything. And somewhere in London, he would be preparing to act the moment she gave the signal. For now, she would play the part perfectly, because one false move could mean the end, not just of Eleanina Hartwell, but of Bella Ashcroft herself. Courage, quick thinking, and, well, your own overconfidence, Inspector Morrison said, his tone firm but measured. Lady Ashcroft, your organization has left a trail too long and too intricate to ignore. Documents, correspondence, testimonies from your associates, and thankfully, your attempt to manipulate the Hartwell identity provided the final confirmation we needed. Bella took a shaky breath, feeling a mix of exhaustion and relief. I helped as much as I could, she admitted, glancing at Edward, whose presence lent her strength she hadn't realized she still needed. Catherine's eyes flared with anger. You'll regret this. You may have escaped my tower, but you will never escape me. Edward stepped forward, voice calm but unwavering. Not today, Catherine. Justice will be served, and your reign of manipulation and murder ends here. The constables moved to restrain her, but Catherine struggled, her fury echoing through the dining room. Lady Peaton, Mr. Blackthorne, and Worthington exchanged startled glances as the reality of the arrest sank in. Worthington's charming facade crumbled entirely, revealing the fear and calculation beneath. Inspector Morrison raised a hand, commanding silence. Everyone present will remain until statements are taken. Lady Ashcroft is formally under arrest. Any attempt to resist or escape will be met with immediate force. Bella let herself slump into the nearest chair, her hands trembling as the weight of the past week's danger began to lift. Edward knelt beside her, placing a protective hand over hers. You were incredible, he murmured. I couldn't have done this without you. For the first time in days, Bella allowed herself a small smile. We did it together, she replied, her violet eyes meeting his steel-grey ones. There was more to resolve, financial inquiries, legal proceedings, and rebuilding her life, but for now, the immediate danger had passed. Catherine was escorted out, still hissing threats, while the other conspirators were questioned on the spot. Lady Peaton's calm, sinister veneer cracked as Edward and Morrison revealed the evidence she could no longer deny. Worthington's plans unraveled as well, his network exposed and dismantled. Bella leaned back, exhausted but triumphant, realizing how close she had come to never seeing another dawn. Edward squeezed her hand gently. "You're safe now," he said softly. "And this time, no one will take that away from you." For the first time since her father's illness, since the fall from the tower, and the weeks of deception and danger, Bella felt a tentative, precious sense of peace. Justice had been done. The conspirators were behind bars, and she could finally breathe, knowing she had survived, and that love, in its quiet, steadfast way, had endured through the darkness. Edward's gaze lingered on her, a promise unspoken but understood. "Now," he said quietly, "we rebuild. And we make sure no one ever threatens you like that again." Bella nodded, leaning into him. "Together," she whispered. And in that moment, with the danger finally behind them, they both understood that they had not only conquered the conspirators but had forged a bond that no plot, no deception, and no danger could sever. Never met under ordinary conditions, and yet, "I cannot imagine my life without you. Every risk we've taken, every danger we've faced, brought us here, and I would face it all again 1,000 times if it meant you by my side." Bella felt a warmth she hadn't dared to allow herself over the past weeks. The terror, the plotting, the masquerade, all of it faded slightly in the presence of this steadfast devotion. She reached for his hand, intertwining her fingers with his. "Edward." "I?" He shook his head gently. "No words are necessary right now. What matters is that we choose this life together, free from deceit, free from those who would harm us." Bella drew a deep breath, letting the weight of her old identity, the life dictated by expectations and threats, fall away. "Then I choose you. Not a title, not a role, not a fortune. Me. Just me." Edward smiled, the relief and tenderness in his expression almost more intoxicating than the brandy they'd been drinking. "Then we begin anew. Together, we write our own story." For the first time since the dark night at Ashcraft Manor, Bella felt hope. She wasn't merely surviving anymore, she was living. And by Edward's side, she would live boldly, with courage, and with love that had been forged in fire and shadow but now had the chance to flourish in the light. As the evening drew on, the city of London continued unaware of the night's full drama, the collapse of a criminal empire, the survival of a courageous young woman, and the bond of love that had emerged stronger than any danger. Bella rested her head lightly against Edward's shoulder, the safety and warmth of the moment anchoring her in a new reality. "What do we do first?" she asked softly, a small smile tugging at her lips. Edward lifted her chin gently, his steel-grey eyes holding hers. "First, we rest. Tomorrow, we begin the life we've earned. A life where neither fear nor treachery dictate our choices. A life together." Bella exhaled, a sense of peace settling over her. She had faced death, deception, and betrayal, but she had emerged victorious. And now, with Edward beside her, she was ready to face whatever came next, not as a pawn or a victim, but as a woman who had claimed her own destiny. For the first time, she whispered, almost to herself, "I'm alive, truly alive." Edward's hand tightened around hers. "And you always will be. As long as we face it together." In that quiet moment, the horrors of the past week seemed distant shadows. What remained was the promise of tomorrow, love, and a life chosen, not dictated, a life truly their own. "He suspects the truth?" Bella asked, a flicker of worry passing over her features. Edward shook his head gently. "Not yet. But I think soon he'll realize that you survived. And when that happens, you can decide how and when to reveal yourself. For now, it's best to let him recover without the shock of sudden revelation." Bella exhaled, relief and longing mingling. I want him to know I'm alive, eventually. I want him to see that I survived and that justice was done." Edward pressed a tender kiss to the top of her head. "He will. In time. And by then, you'll be ready, and the world will see the woman you've become, strong, courageous, and loved." As twilight deepened over the Yorkshire hills, Bella leaned into Edward, feeling the solidity of their life together. They had faced darkness, danger, and betrayal, but now the future stretched before them, unbroken and full of possibility. "Tomorrow, then," she said softly, "we ensure that the last of them cannot harm anyone ever again." Edward tightened his embrace. "Tomorrow, we finish the story, and then we begin our true life, without fear, without pretense. Together." Bella smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached her violet eyes. For the first time, she felt complete. Not as a title, not as a disguise, not as a pawn in someone else's game, but as herself, Mrs. Bella Kensington, a survivor, a witness, and a woman free to love and to live fully. And as night settled around them, the garden filled with the quiet promise of new beginnings, they stood together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever dawn might bring. "And now you're asking me to step back into danger, not for myself, but for others," Edward said, his voice low but steady. It's a different kind of risk, and I won't lie, it will change everything about the life we've just begun.